just her being so new to the organization, I just offered to report out, with her on Get With The Guidelines CAD and the updates. And there's tons of updates right now with Get With The Guidelines CAD and Mission Lifeline overall. So the first update is Mission Lifeline EMS recognition. So every year, January, first part of January, the Mission Lifeline EMS recognition application opens, and we ask EMS agencies that participate to submit their data by the end of March. This year is no different. March 31st is the data deadline. However, the application has changed, as well as the required measures have also been updated for this year. For this year, we still have STEMI measures in tier 1 of the recognition. So that's another update, is there's 2 tiers. Tier 1 is EMS centric. So all of the data is pure EMS data, no hospital data required for tier 1. So with the EMS measures, we've also added a few required stroke measures. In the past, the stroke measures were optional reporting measures, and a few of them have been bumped up to required measures. The second tier, which requires achieving a level of recognition, bronze, silver, or gold with tier 1, is the system of care or target heart attack level of recognition. And if anyone's familiar with our target stroke and target heart failure programs, it's along those same lines. That is where EMS will report their numerators and denominators for EMS FMC to PCI within 90 minutes and or arrival to lytics within 30 minutes. So it's more of the system care. And just wanted to provide you all the updates, one, in case any EMS agencies are interested, or if you wanted to push some information out to the EMS agencies to get them in line to submit the application, we would appreciate it. There's no cost to participate. There's no other quote unquote participation requirements. There's no registry entering data all through the year, none of that. It's really just submitting their numerators and denominators. It's a smart sheet form this year, a little more streamlined. And then in midsummer, we announce if the agencies achieve recognition or not. I will pause there to see if there's any questions about EMS recognition. Okay, we're also being the Q1 of the calendar year. This is, we call this our Mission Lifeline recognition season. So right now, Amber, myself, and our counterparts, we're supporting all of our Get With The Guidelines hospitals to make sure all the Get With The Guidelines data, including Get With The Guidelines CAD, that all the 2022 patient record data is entered correctly, and entered in on time. So as you know, we don't really have quarterly data deadlines for Get With The Guidelines CAD data. The real-time tool, we're trying to push folks to enter data as concurrently as possible, so there's no delay in that feedback for the data. The only absolute deadline that we have is March 31st, and that is because on the morning of April 1st, IQVIA runs the file of data that's been entered, and then we do an automated analysis of that data in order to identify the hospitals that do achieve Mission Lifeline / Get With The Guidelines CAD recognition. So, so that's that. And then above and beyond that, this past weekend, Get With The Guidelines CAD just underwent a huge update. If you've seen the webinar, great. If you haven't seen the webinar, we can provide the link to the webinar to review it so that you have more details about that update. But it's the most significant update we've had since we launched in 2017. We are now going to accept data for inpatient STEMIs and STEMIs, as well as chest pain, angina patients. There have not been any new measures created as of yet to support the new patient populations that can be appropriately entered in to get with the guidelines CAD, but that is coming in the future. The new form, it was first available yesterday for users to use. It works off of the admission date. So if the arrival date for all patients with an arrival date of January 1st, 2023, as of right now, when that patient is entered, and we call it's the version 3 form, the version 3 form shows if any 2023 data was entered in prior to this past Friday, the version 2 form was used or was shown. Be assured that our measures have been updated so that it takes into account any new elements that might be in version 3 to run appropriately. So, it'll work off of either version as far as your measures. If you're in Get With The Guidelines CAD and you notice something that might be a little quirky, please let Amber, please just shoot Amber a quick email and let her know that, hey, is this running like it's supposed to? Is this an issue? We found one issue that I know of is that for any patient record that was entered in prior to the update this past weekend, when you open that record in the arrival date and time element, you get like this message, this 4-line long message in red saying, hey, this patient was arrived after January 1st. You might want to think about opening up the new version and entering the patient in the new version tool. We're advising anyone who comes across that message to just leave the data as it is. That message should not be showing. So there are still little quirks, that we're hearing about. But if you see anything out of the ordinary, please just let us know and we'll get that researched as soon as possible. The only other thing with the update is the coding instructions will be available hopefully by the end of the week. So that's another big item, is the coding instructions weren't quite 100% ready with the launch. So I believe that, that's a lot for Get With The Guidelines CAD as well as for EMS, but I think that's it. If anyone has any questions, happy to take them.
I have one quick question. So we're including inpatient settings now?
Yes, ma'am. As of so if you're entering in 2022 data, the form will still show version 2. So as long as the patient arrival date is January 1st or after, the version 3 form is used, and version 3 has been built to support adding inpatient AMIs.
Has everyone seen the version 3 form?
So version 3 is, the CRF is available in the CAD library, as well as the updated measure descriptions. When you, they have we've had some great show hide features, even with the version 2. So this version does have show hide. I printed out the CRF and it was like 13 pages long and it seemed to go on forever. But, and there's no good way to show the show hide in a PDF version. So just take that into account, that if you select patient did not arrive by EMS, obviously the EMS time tracker elements will not open and so forth. So there's just no good way to show that on paper, but the form is available in the Get With The Guidelines CAD library.
Hi, this is Martha. Can you hear me?
Yes, Martha, go ahead.
Hi. I had found a couple issues. I've been in the forum today.
Okay.
One of the things I did send to Amber this morning was that line when we went into a patient that was put in a couple weeks ago, but in 2023. So we should just ignore that and just save
Ignore that. Yes.
Okay.
If we
Um,
hear and that's the guidance that we have received from our HIT representative. If for some reason we hear anything different, hopefully they would send an email or a message, via CAD. But we will let you know, but I don't expect to hear anything different.
Okay. Another thing I did send to IQVIA IT was actually about the EMS tracking. So we had a patient came to our facility not by EMS, was a walk-in, and the EMS tracker information is still popping up and showing as missing, even though the patient was a walk-in. So I
Okay.
did make IT aware of that. They just got back to me saying, I don't know why this is showing up.
Right?
And has escalated to the program management team for further
Okay.
investigation.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Yeah,
Mm.
so that's part of the show hide feature, and it should hide those EMS time tracker elements.
Okay.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you. I think in April they have a scheduled I call it a quirk release. I don't know that the details of that have been provided to us yet, but they had it scheduled to address any, these types of findings that we find in the first couple of weeks of the new form being available. They're also going to be doing some updates in June. So, if just keep sending us anything that doesn't look like it should be there, or, just looks odd.
Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
So Amber, with the new form, is there gonna be an update in any of the measures?
So
For
the
STEMI or non-STEMI or?
So the measures themselves are the same. So it's still the same measure set. What has been updated is the elements for version 3 may have a different label than for version 2. So the logic has been updated to accept the labels naming, no matter if it's version 2 or version 3. Because if you put in data prior to this past weekend, you're still on version 2 form. So that has been updated. As far as like adding a measure arrival to PCI within 60 minutes, there's no updates in, in what the measures are, if that makes sense. No changes in the measures themselves, but changes in the just updates in the logic to support V3. The one thing, if we have any hospitals that are PHAC or AHAC or CHAC certified, those measure groups somehow, they're the same measures as in the recognition measure group, but had to be updated separately for whatever reason. The measures in the CHAC and PHAC and PHAC, Primary Heart Attack Center, Acute Heart Attack Ready, and Comprehensive Heart Attack Center, those measures will be updated in either April or June. So just the only advice we have for that is just to run the individual measures from the achievement measure group.
And you said this is also going to start including inpatient STEMIs?
Yes, no measures have been created for inpatient STEMIs, but the tool, the tool does now. It was built to also accept inpatient STEMIs and to be able to create measures around those inpatient STEMIs.
Hi,
I'm sorry,
Lori. This is Jennifer at St. Joe's. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, I had a question. I was using the form this weekend on some STEMIs and just wanted some clarification around a measure. And if this is going to come out in the data dictionary, please let me know. I don't want to
Okay.
take up time here, but just to clarify, I noted on the new form there's a STEMI alert activated, and I wondered how that differs from a EMS consult, which is also asked for, as well as a cath lab activation.
So yeah, so I have not seen the updated coding instructions at all. So we're actually awaiting those specific definitions as well. So as soon as the coding instructions are available, I know I'm going to dive into them. I would say hopefully they're available by Friday. If they're available this week, dive into them, look at it, make sure it makes sense. And then I would suggest bringing it back to Amber just to make sure we're clear, because those are totally new. So yeah, we're waiting on those as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, great question though.
Just a question to MEMS about this. Are you guys going to be interested in inpatient STEMIs since it's going to be included in JCAD?
I think that's a good question. I think it's definitely something that we need to discuss together and find out what, as a group, we feel is important to us.
Just a question to all the other hospitals. How many of you think you're going to be using it for inpatient STEMI? Since we're capturing cath PCI, and how many of you are thinking about using it for chest pain angina patients?
I have to take it back.
Yeah. Because that could really be a significant load.
Yeah, and just to clarify, those patient populations are not required. So we're still, our primary focus is on systems of care, STEMI as we've always collected, NSTEMI as we've always collected. I think in time, there may be an opportunity for inpatient STEMI recognition measures of sort, but I don't see that coming in the next 2 years or so. Or I don't anticipate inpatient STEMI population being required. These updates, 99% of the updates were done via feedback from our users. They created a focus group, several focus groups over the course of the last few years, and based on feedback from users, these updates were derived. So, if you don't want to collect the inpatient STEMIs, I don't think there's any, there's no urgency to do so, but it is available if there is that, if you do wish to do so.
Hey, Lori, this is Elizabeth from Hopkins.
Hi.
Hi. Is AHA ever going to think about doing, when you're doing the metric reports, it would really be helpful for us to have all MI as a group. So like for discharge with a beta blocker, discharge with ACE-ARB for all MI patients, it's really difficult that you have to do it for non-STEMI and STEMI and then add up, there's stuff for your metrics when you're, presenting it to our people in our institution.
Great question. And Amber and I will make sure we write that down and we will take it to the group. If anyone with that said, they're looking for volunteers to be on the next focus group. So if anyone from this group is interested, just send your information to Amber and we can get it to our HIT team and let them know that you're interested. And again, it's to give user feedback on the V3 tool, and then what can we do to make it better, as well as, even the measure groups better, the reports better, whatever we can do to improve. I like that idea myself because I find I do the same thing, having to do both sets of measures.
Is there any other questions for AHA?
If there are no other questions right now, just know that
have
if
one
you,
more question, I'm sorry.
oh,
So
that's,
for like the
oh, go
achievement measures for 23, if this in-house STEMIs are optional, do you take those out of the achievement measure?
so that is the plan. Yes, is that there's an element that would be used to specifically identify the inpatient STEMIs. And our HIT team and measures team have worked to make sure that the inpatient STEMIs are not in the denominators of the measures. Now, I will say that there's not enough version 3 data in yet. I'm trying to locate one of my Georgia hospitals do really good with concurrent data collection. So I'm trying to find a couple that might have already entered inpatient STEMIs to test the theory. So definitely stay tuned. It's supposed to, our measures are supposed to remove the inpatient STEMIs. I haven't tested it or seen it to say, yep, absolutely it does.
Thanks.
And I have to see it to believe it.
So the only other thing I would ask is if you could send the webinar link out to all of us. Well,
Yep, we
that
can
way
do
we
that.
have it as a reference and if someone needs to go back and look at something in it, they can go back and look.
Can I
Seems like
put the link in the chat box? Would that help?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay,
A
I-
question.
I think there's a question in the chat real quick as well.
The question is it possible to run NSTEMI and STEMI as aggregate data?
I think that's the same, probably the same thing we just discussed. You know,
Okay.
there's right now, there's no one measure that looks at all AMI. They are separated by STEMI and our NSTEMI populations.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep, and if anybody thinks of any other questions, definitely send those to Amber and you know, I'm sure she'll get back to you as soon as possible. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on, today, so MIMS is here with us today, and I would like to introduce Katie Hall. So she is the new director of the Cardiac Intervention Center for MIMS. And most of you probably have received an email from her stating what year this is. And we have met Kenny before. Kenny is here with us from MIMS today as well. So welcome. Thanks for coming. And I think you guys have a presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. Glad to formally attend one of the MHCC meetings. I know I've attended and sat in virtually before, just to observe and see how MIMS can really be a part of. I know we've been a part for many years, but this is a great group. I love the way that you all work together and the discussion. I learned a lot during the discussion of the different cases that were reviewed. So just moving right on in, 2023 to 2024 is busy season for cardiac interventional centers in Maryland. So next year, we have 23 centers that are going to be undergoing our designation site visits. That process for redesignation actually begins this year. It started in January when we sent the notice of letters of intent to the CEOs of each hospital. We also have 4 out-of-state hospitals that are going to be due for their MOU renewals. Do we have any out-of-state hospitals on the line today? Anyone from Delaware or DC? Okay. All right, so I also want to announce, I'm not sure if you all are aware or if any of you are attending, there's an, excuse me, there's an educational conference coming up March 4th through the 6th. It's the ACC 23, it's the ACC's annual conference. Will anyone be attending that? Don't be shy if you are. All right, well, please spread the word. You know, let people know in your organization that this conference is available. They are offering in-person and virtual attendance, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn there. You can go on to the next slide. All right, so I'd like to formally transfer discussion of the Office of Care Integration to Kenny Barajas, Chief of the Office.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just to let you know that MIMS and our office, my office, and Katie being the director are truly committed to helping, coaching, mentoring, consulting, doing whatever to make all of us successful, right? That is the goal. So anytime you need any of us, I want Katie to dedicate her time to supporting you guys. That's the #1 goal. And if we support, we coach, we mentor, when we go through this process together, all of us are successful. You know, if you fail, Katie and I fail. And I don't like to do that. So please welcome us. Please join us. Please help us get together and truly elevate the care of what we do for the state of Maryland. You know, so this is really here for Katie, right? This is her service line, but I did want to introduce myself and to tell you that at any time you need anything, or your colleagues from a different service line need anything, that email that she put up there, the ociadmin.org, actually gets everybody on my team. So it gets all my directors. So you can just, if you don't know who to talk to or what service line or where to go, OCI admins goes into our bucket, and the proper person will pick it up and will help you with any service line. So thank you for having us.
All right. Any questions on any of that so far?
Oh, can you go back? I'm sorry.
Hi.
Oh, if you can go, yeah. So I talked about consultations and site visits. I can tell you the designation, it's a 5-year designation, right? I'm also gonna tell you that there's something in COMAR regs that says, as long as you maintain the level of competence. And the only way that we can verify that is to come and say hi to you every single year. And that is exactly what we're going to do. Right? We're gonna come in and check in every single year. I'm gonna have Katie do that. So please welcome her, right? She's your partner. She's here to help you guys. So please use her. And that takes me to the last bullet, which is mock surveys. We are committed to coming to your facility on your non-designation year to come in and doing a mock survey, the survey that you will get as a practice round to identify strengths and identify weaknesses of the program. And we can also help with trying to improve your program. I know Amber and her team, they just talked about AHARs and PHACs and CHACs. I am currently still a Joint Commission reviewer, and I do AHARs, PHACs, CHACs, and CCCs as well. So I can give you not only what we're doing in Maryland, but I can give you what's happening across the country. And then with Katie's expertise, we can come from both angles with the review process, and we can definitely help you out. We want to make this as painless as possible when the time comes for a designation. It should just be another thing where Katie's back again. And that's how we want to make it seem. Or she's back to help again. It's not, she's bringing out the stick. She's really bringing out the carrot. Well, thank you. Please use those mock surveys, are free. We will come to your facility. We have no memory. And what I mean by no memory is if we go into a medical record, you write that medical record down. And whatever deficiency we define, we'll give it to you and say, this is what we found. We will never, ever look at that same medical record again. If we go into your organization and we look at record 1, 2, 3, you write it down, we'll sign it. We'll never look at that record again.
I can attest to that. I've attended some mock surveys with Kenny for other service lines. He'll have one sheet of paper, he'll jot down his notes, and at the end, he's hand delivering that sheet of paper to whoever is in charge of that mock survey at the organization. So we walk out with nothing.
Come in peace.
Will we know before you come?
Absolutely. You get to choose the date. We'll look at our schedule. You get to choose the date that you want us to come in. Right? And not only that, we'll give you an agenda. The agenda has all the components of the real survey, right? Or designation. You can pick and choose what items of that agenda you want us to look at. If you only want us to look at records, which 90% of the deficiencies comes from record reviews, right? If you want us to interview your staff, we get a little bit more there, very little. If you want us to look at policies, procedures, you want us to look at your PI initiatives, make sure you're on the right track with the right theoretical framework, the way you provide care, and the way you improve your data. We'll do one or all as many times as your schedule and our schedule allows. We're the end, right? Why not use this? You know exactly what we're looking for. You'll know exactly how we define that coma regulation. Fair? Any questions on that? I can tell you your quality folks and your admin folks, your C-suite folks are gonna be kind of, oh, right? Have them call me. Have them call me and I will talk them down. Right? And I will truly give them a vision. I'll put anything in writing for the no memories and the medical records and all that stuff. We'll do whatever to convince you guys that we're truly here to help your organizations. That's our goal. And we are committed to stick to that goal. We are not there to catch anybody doing anything crazy. We're truly there to identify areas of opportunities and help you go through them and look at some successes, because we're not only gonna give you information when we're on site, we're going to take from you as well. We've identified some organizations that are doing extremely well in some things. We're gonna go into your organizations and that's gonna be our first ask. Can you please tell us how in the world are you doing this so well? Because we wanna give it to your colleagues. And that's all, everybody on the line and everybody at this table. Fair? Questions?
There's a question. Do we send an email to the OCI address for preferred dates for mock survey?
Yeah, you can send it to the OCI@MIMS.org or the director, Katie Hall. If you can't remember her name, OCI@MIMS will come into the bucket and we can pick it up from there. And then is there a chart?
Next, is there a charge for mock survey?
No, that's your hard tax dollars at work. There is zero charge for mock surveys
From MIPS.
from MIMS. Thank you for your time. Katie, I'll give it back to you.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so yeah, so this is our timeline for redesignation. So the re-verification, that is a process to achieve redesignation. So like I said, in January, we had the notice of the call for letters of intent that went out. And then once I receive all of the letters of intent from all hospitals, like I said, there are 23 centers that are due for redesignation in 2024. I'll submit that posting to the Maryland Register for public comment. We are almost there. We just have the majority of the centers have submitted their letters of intent. We want to make sure that we get those letters in as soon as possible, because I want to make sure that everyone has access to the application in enough time to get it completed. Once the 30-day time frame for public comment is completed, that's when I'm able to distribute the application and the email link in order to upload. So every hospital is going to need to identify one single person who is going to have access to that online application and be able to upload it. And I'll need the name of that person from each hospital. It cannot go to multiple people, just one. So as you see, the sending out the application is dependent on the date that we post to the Maryland Register. The date that we post to the Maryland Register is based on when we receive all of the letters of intent. The application deadline is already set for October 20th. And the final deadline for mock surveys for the 2024 redesignation calendar year is going to be November 17th. Okay, so to really try to reach out, get those scheduled. Let us know if you have any questions. Really shake the trees at your organizations and see if they're on board. And if not, like Kenny said, have them reach out to us. Okay. And then beginning in January of next year, we'll start scheduling for the site visits. Like I said, there's 23 hospitals. So trying to figure out different ways to work with all 23 centers and make sure that we accommodate everyone's availability. So it's a huge undertaking, but I'm excited to be working with you all. And so we'll go through this process together. All right, next slide. I don't know if anyone from out of state has joined us since I asked last time.
I think there was a couple of people in the chat, someone from Delaware. And someone
Oh, okay, great, great. Yes, so I have been in contact with many of you at the different organizations. So just to let you know, we're going to schedule a site visit. It's going to follow the same agenda as all of the other site visits for the in-state hospitals. And then after that site visit, we'll go ahead and send the contract for review prior to the expiration date. Do any of you have questions on that? Okay. All right, so the agenda for the site visit, just wanted to go over this briefly. I did send out some sample agendas before, but like I said, they were subject to change and it has been updated. So prior to today, the agenda was from 8 to 2. Now it's from 8 to 4. And just to extend it to make sure that we have enough time to share, your organizations have enough time to showcase all of the great things that you all are doing. And we're able to learn from each other during that time. So we'll begin the day with intros and we'll go through, you all will present your organization, present any kind of data, quality management initiatives that you have, any kind of improvements that you've made. You all will definitely have the floor at that time to just showcase all of the great things that you are doing. After that, we'll kick over to our hospital tour. We'll look at areas like the ED, ICU, cath lab. We'll speak with the staff there, you know, and find out what is the process in those different departments. Like, what is the process when you have a STEMI patient hit your doors? We'll go to lunch and then next slide.
We'll send the slide.
Yes.
Yes, I would definitely send the slides out. After lunch, we'll start our medical record review. And that's going to be 2.5 hours long. Really taking our time to go through that. Want to make sure that you have the previous 2 years of STEMI cases, as well as any in-house STEMI cases for review that day. Do want to add that during the medical review, I think previously you were informed of the cases in advance. We're just asking that you have 2 years worth of cases and we'll pick the cases at random. There may be times when in reviewing the data through Get With The Guidelines, we find a problematic case. And at that point, we might say, hey, let's look at the process that took place in this case and see what happened there, you know. Definitely want to be non-punitive when we're looking at those kind of cases from a data standpoint. But we want to make sure that we're able to learn from the case. We'll then, after the medical record review, we'll start our HR and credentialing review. So any staff members that we've spoken with, Any staff members that has been on medical records has the potential to be reviewed. So we'll look at their licenses, certifications, et cetera. After that, we'll just finalize our report, our presentation, and then we'll have our closing session at 3:30, from 3:30 to 4, and that'll be it. Do you have any questions on the site visit? Does anyone hate it? All right, I take it that you love it then. All right, so next slide. So after the site visit, you can expect a full report and decision from MIMS sent to the CEO within 45 days. The hospital will then have 30 days to accept or decline MIMS's decision. And then, just so you're aware, the regs for decisions on designation are covered under COMAR 380207. Next slide. Now, I want to make sure that everybody's aware of the correct place to review COMAR regs. There are a lot of sites out there that republish the regs, but we want to make sure that you're getting them directly from the source. In case anything changes, it's going to be changed there first, and everyone else is playing catch up. So please go to dsd.maryland.gov. Again, for cardiac interventional centers, COMAR is 300816. That's Title 30, Subtitle 08, Chapter 16. Other relevant chapters that we integrate into our process include 01 through 04, as well as 07. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the regs, because we incorporate all of that in our designation. They give you insomnia. Who is that? Rosemary. Don't worry, they give me a little bit of insomnia too. So we're in the same boat. We'll be all right. All right, so next, I just want to go over some of our performance data for MIMS, all of our MIMS hospitals. That includes all cardiac interventional centers, both in-state as well as our out-of-state centers. And particular, I felt that the most relevant to our current designation are AHA, CAD 2, 6, 8, 9, and 18, those measures. Feel free, if there's any that you feel should be relevant, please let me know, okay? So let's go on to the first data slide.
Right, there was a question in the chat. Are there a certain number of cases we'll be reviewing?
Certain number of cases during the medical record review? No, it's just as many that we can get through. We're gonna make use of the entire time and just as many as we can get.
Sometimes we'll review a record in 5 minutes. And sometimes, unfortunately, it might take us a long time when we find things that are not done perfect. Right? It'll give us the opportunity to really dive in and look at. We don't set a number.
Did that answer the question? Okay. All right, so our first slide that we're going to look at is AHA CAD2, arrival at first facility to primary PCI in less than or equal to 120 minutes. And all of these slides are comparing our MIMS data to our national data for STEMI receiving centers. That's all we have right now in the state of Maryland. It's a designation for STEMI receiving centers. That's who enters and to get with the guidelines. So that comparison, there's definite room to improve. The percentages there, I can't see, but it's about 59% for MIMS, 72.5% for STEMI receiving centers nationally. That is the average. So there's room for improvement there. Any comments on this? Any thoughts?
So it's interesting because it's not this metric, and I don't know, if I'll wait and see, maybe you pulled up another metric. We have a lot of discussions about the first medical contact to device time of 90 minutes or less. That is a really hard metric to make.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
don't know if you have. you've
the
looked at data
discussions.
On that.
Yeah, I believe I have that incorporated in it. So, let's go on to the next slide.
Katie, do you want to respond to this question?
I can't see.
Katie says the EMS metrics occasionally don't provide a fulsome reflection. In Frederick County, as it covers a large geographic area with multiple counties response, the BLS unit may have an arrival time 5 minutes prior to the ALS. So to get with the guidelines, only ask for first medical contact. So when they call 911, they could send out the fire department. And they could get there and start assessing the patient, but they don't have all the ALS, they don't transport the patient, so it might be another 5 to 8 minutes. And get with the guidelines, they want you to report first medical contact. So it's
Right.
whoever that first person is that gets there, and then you gotta wait for the ACLS unit to get there, and they're the ones that are responsible for transporting, so.
Yeah, so I get the question. I think it's important to look at this as the fact that we're putting this data, we're entering this data into this registry, not just to say, okay, we're meeting all our marks. This is going to be our driver for performance improvement. This helps us identify where the problems are, where the breakdowns happen, so that we can come together and collectively work as a group to try to fix it. You know, whether some of it could be, okay, do we ask for additional elements and get with the guidelines? Is there something that we need to do as a state together? How do we get our feedback to EMS? You know, there's so many facets that we can approach this from, but the important thing is to just get the data in there and that we look at it together as a group. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so number 6, EKG within 10 minutes of arrival. Again, nationally, we're doing better within the state. There's room for improvement. There's room for improvement across the board, I will say. But, you know, we definitely want to at least do as well as we are as the nation, you know. Go on to the next slide. Number 8 is the Mission Lifeline, first medical contact to primary PCI in 90 minutes or less. And excuse me, 120 minutes when transport time is prolonged. So this is the slide, this was what you were referring to. Yeah, so we're not that far off nationally. It seems to be an issue nationally. But I will say we've been doing some deep dive and looking at the data and breaking it down even further. We're looking at, as Katie mentioned, we've seen hospitals that are just doing phenomenal at some of these things. There's a potential to break things down by region. Is it a region of EMS that we need to elevate? You know, different things like that. So just keep an open mind. You know, we're looking at our data and it's going to help us all to grow. I'm really excited. So I don't know if you can tell.
Isn't there, so there is a set time, right, from EMS, from the time that they arrive to the time that they leave? Isn't there like a set standard that they want them to
There's a
be?
goal, yeah, absolutely.
A goal for them to be in and out
Yes,
and on the way.
I believe it. Isn't it 30 minutes for? There's nothing specific in Comar.
No,
Yeah.
I think that was like a goal, you know, for them to be at the home and out of the home within like 20 minutes. I thought it was. And then,
30.
And we keep pushing, right? The guy I share a wall with is a state EMS medical director, right? We keep banging on his wall saying, hey, tell those guys to get out of there. You know, so, yeah, we keep educating and pushing and training and all that stuff.
Matter of fact, Kenny just did an educational session
It
for
was-
stroke. To EMS, just to educate them on the importance of moving quickly. Don't waste additional time on the scene doing further assessments once you identify that it is what it is, just. move on.
Feedback to them seems to be helping them a lot. and
Absolutely.
really appreciate that. And then sometimes when we really have a difficult case, what I do is like a feedback review that I post in their EMS room. Then we go through that in our CIC meeting. I break down in minutes, how many time, how much minute, was it within EKG, how many was the transport time? It really helps them, prepare them for their next ME, it's so fresh. Their education person is on our CICC meetings, and so she kind of like passes it on to the whole team on a monthly basis. Feedback has put a huge impact on our first point of contact.
And as a matter of fact, I actually have a EMS ride-along scheduled this Thursday. So I'm looking forward to that. I want to see firsthand what are some of the challenges they have out in the field, because I've been in the hospital environment my whole life, so it would be nice to see things on that side. So.
One question for other reasons for time prolonged, you'll accept, like if a patient is bypassed from one hospital and has to go to another due to, the ED is on red or yellow or something.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. the
She's
question.
asking if you accept if the hospital has to be bypassed. I guess they're bringing the patient in and that hospital is asking to be bypassed because they're on red alert and the patient goes to another center.
Well, technically, they should not be bypassing any
Still
study
bypass for priority one.
at all.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mary. I'm calling from Suburban. The patient that Diane is referring to presented to Holy Cross Germantown, and his EKG was suspicious and he needed to be sent to a cardiac center. They reached out to Shady Grove, who had a patient on their table having STEMI and didn't have a team to accommodate. They called Suburban and we accepted the patient. So all that taking time to get the patient a place to be treated with the first hospital's inability to complete or take care of his STEMI. The question is, in that scenario, we get the hit for delay in the transfer. So I guess.
So I think the question is, were they unavailable? I need to know the definition of unavailable. Because that could mean a number of things.
She said in their case, they had. a
Hi,
STEMI on the
this is
table.
Karen from Shady Grove.
There's no,
You only have one lab and one table.
there's
Can you
only
hear-
one lab.
Can you hear me? This is Karen from Shady Grove.
Or have two
Yes, we can hear you, Karen. Go ahead.
Thanks. It was off hours and we only had one call team available.
Okay, and then is there I guess, contingency plan? I think that's an important thing for all centers to consider. I know you all do a really great job. Everyone does a great job of planning for a potential STEMI. But you also have to think about the contingency plan, because according to COMAR, you all have to be available to provide services 24/7, 365.
Right, there was, and we can talk about it offline if you'd like, but yes.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll talk about that offline, because I think there's a little bit, another statement.
Yeah, and it's not anything like, this is an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow. And, right now, me stating that is by no means saying, oh, you have to do this right now, not at all.
Well, I think a lot of us could be in that situation because there's a lot of us that only have one lab and we don't have a mega staff. We have one staff, and when it's in the middle of the night, you have one nurse, you've got one rad tech and one cardiovascular tech and a physician. So, to just bring a patient to the table and put him on the table and another STEMI show up in the ED. It's tough, and everybody, I think, handles it maybe a little bit differently. I mean,
Now, I have a question. We have, so I did a lot of work with stroke before. In the stroke world in Maryland, there's a quality improvement council for stroke. And as a matter of fact, the Quality Improvement Council is something that's supported by Comart Regs. But, you know, we're having such interesting discussion. There's so much ahead, you know, so many directions that we can go. You know, I would just, over time, that's something that I think would be beneficial for the cardiac world in Maryland. I'd love to know your thoughts. Feel free to email me, share your thoughts on that. We'll discuss that further. You know, we definitely have time. Want to get through this redesignation phase. But that's definitely something to consider. But okay, next slide.
Oh, there's another question. Contingency plan is for lytics and transfer. However, the interventionist should consider PCI as the gold standard, and we'll see if another nearby hospital can accommodate the STEMI patient. Thank you, Tony, for sharing.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I think that's what they did once to us. When we had two STEMIs, one was in ED, one was already in the cath lab. And our neighboring hospital called us. You know, if we could take another patient, yeah.
So would that be considered an official bypass? I don't think that's because the hospital's on red.
Hi, no, this is Tony from Anne Arundel. I posted that note. No, it's not bypass. However, the conversation, we, like other areas, we serve 3 to 4 different EMS regions where we are. And so we receive hospitals from the Eastern Shore as well as Southern Maryland and some other areas. And occasionally we'll receive a call, for example, from a MedStar hospital in DC that did not accept the patient as a STEMI patient, and they reached out to us to take a patient. So in this particular incident, you know, we might have a STEMI on the table. We may have a patient that's on the way to us, maybe another 20 minutes out or so. When we get the notification, you've got a complicated patient on the table that may be in cardiac arrest. We don't have another team in the middle of the night. So the question then is to the EMS providers, you know, what's BWMC doing? How close are you to another interventional center? Can you see if they can take this patient? And we've received patients under those circumstances as well. And because it's an alternate route, we end up falling out of the 90-minute first medical contact to balloon time, and other hospitals do as well.
It's a tough thing. Yeah. At MIMS, we look at, it's a higher level view, and I'm currently looking at, I have an app that tells me exactly how many hospitals are yellow and red right now.
Right, we've all seen that.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, and on average, 70% of the CICs in the state are saying, don't come here. We can, and at sometimes Katie's pulled the numbers, I looked at the numbers, and the whole, from Baltimore West, everybody's saying, don't come.
Well, you know what, we're not
Excellent.
talking about a red and yellow alert status or bypass or reroute. We're talking about there's a patient on the table and
Got
one
it.
team, and our room is full with an active STEMI patient. And they're heading to us with another. And then the question is, since you're en route, can you reach another CIC center within the appropriate time frame to take this patient? And we answer yes, under every circumstance. We will take the patient. We're never on bypass. We're never on divert.
Perfect.
We never do that. I probably most hospitals here don't do that. It doesn't have anything to do with the alert status. But when you have a STEMI on the table, we all know that lytics is not the ideal situation, is not optimal. So the interventionist will try to find another center that transport can get to fast enough to serve this patient. And we all do it, and we do it for each other, and we do it for the community. But unfortunately, you know, we pay for it in some of our standings because the patient's coming from an area that's not normally in our catchment area.
And it also takes a few minutes to make that phone
Coordinate.
call back to them and to coordinate the care with the patient. But it's better, if you can send the patient to another hospital for them to get PCI. They come to your hospital and you're either going to give them lytics or they're going to have to sit there for 60 minutes probably for you to finish the case that you have going on and then bring that, and then do the turnover and bring the patient. It could be 60 minutes, it could be 2 hours. You don't know.
Yeah.
So, and when time is tissue, you want to try to find the fastest thing to give the best care to the patient.
we think that everybody's interest is in the patient. We understand, right? We're human too. We work in facilities. But just write it down for us, you know, so if the numbers don't look so hot, we'll probably question it. So yeah, that was a time when. And we're okay with that. She's gonna be okay with that, because I'm okay with that, because I understand reality. We got it, you know, so. Great conversation.
Necessarily, this doesn't point to individual hospital performance. This is system of care performance. So this is the entire system of care for STEMI patients.
But we're thinking about it as an individual because it's part of the STEMI metric if you want to get the award from AHA.
Yes.
And that's what.
That's AHA.
But that is, it's a stick in everybody's side right now. Thorn
We
in
agree
side.
with you.
Yeah. All right, next slide. So number 9, primary PCI in less than or equal to 90 minutes, doing great there, by comparison. Next slide. And this is the first medical contact to primary PCI in less than 90 minutes. So, you know, this is across the board nationally, you know, there's definitely room for improvement, but I think nationally, we're gonna see the pink side go up as, you know, they continue to improve the system of care across the nation. So what can we do in Maryland to make sure that we're improving our system of care so we can push that green bar up as well? Right, that's it. So that's all I have to present today. The next slide is my contact info. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions, comments, concerns. If you were too shy to say anything, please don't be in the future, but feel free to send me an email. I love to hear from you. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. Like I said, there's a wealth of knowledge in your group and at your center, so looking forward to this journey. All right.
Anyone have any questions for Katie or Kenny?
On your side.
Anything in the chat?
Don't be shy.
Thank you.
Speak a pretty like comparable presentation to the office hours that you're holding.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So in the office hours presentation, I am going to dig a little deeper into the data piece. So I have more time because, you know, but it's going to be the same format followed by a more in-depth breakdown of the data.
I have one other question.
Mhm.
This is Tony. Did you say annually? An annual
For-
review?
The mock survey.
No,
Yeah,
no.
So mock surveys are anytime. It's not gonna be an annual review, so like a redesignation review. It's gonna be a check-in. What we don't want is for anybody to slip away in 5 years, right? In our
I
other
gotcha.
service lines, we didn't go for back. And at the 5th year, it was a disaster. And we have people on provisional designations. We don't want to even get there. If we continue to communicate every year at a minimum, we'll have a finger on the pulse, so we'll know what's going on and we can go through the challenges together.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
Something in the chat. Is EMS present during the site reviews? We've collaborated with EMS QA to improve.
We're not.
Yeah,
So then the answer is the EMS does not come with MIMS to do your designation. It is just Katie and I, or Katie and one of my other staff.
yeah, and I can say they've never been present at any of mine either, Margaret.
I think we can look at ways to incorporate EMS involvement in as we move forward. We just have to figure out how, you know, I want to make sure that it's the best use of everyone's time involved, so.
I think it would be good. I think there are some times when we've had some EMS, I feel like fall through the cracks in communicating with us. That we do provide feedback to them.
Mm.
We don't really get a lot of feedback from them.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I would like for them to maybe be a little more involved at times.
Yeah, I do feel like maybe there are regions, some regions are crazy busy. You know,
Yeah,
it's
like we have the city, and I collaborate a lot with Captain Hagley, but they are, I mean, they're crazy busy.
All you guys are.
Yeah,
We look at
everyone's
your numbers,
stretched
you guys
so
are
thin.
crazy.
Follow. You meant, are they allowed to discuss on our side of the table, invite the QA officer?
Sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
whoever you want to be involved in your survey, feel free. It's yours. Show us whatever you want to show us and have anybody speak on your behalf that you want to speak.
All right, so I'm gonna move on to our next agenda item. Talked a lot about AHA. So we're gonna switch to CAF PCI. One of the things I had put on the agenda was coding salvage for patients that come in. So I know there's many times where we have cardiac arrest patients that come, they're in the ED, they code for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. They finally get ROSC. The EKG shows a STEMI and we take it to the cath lab and they have 100% lesion or a thrombus. We stent them, they go to the ED, they never wake up and they pass away. So I'm just wondering how many people are coding these as emergency? Or are you coding them as salvage? You know, what is everyone doing?
Salvage definitely, if it's an out of hospital cardiac arrest. That's the only option to whether truly know if it's STEMI or not, because we're not very sure on.
So all of your out of hospital cardiac arrests, you're.
If they're taking them into the cath lab,
I'm sorry,
if they're taking them into the cath
if they
lab,
take them to the cath lab.
we're not sure if it's STEMI. Then definitely that is a salvage.
Okay, well, what if you have an EKG that shows STEMI, that they get ROSC in the ED and you have an EKG that shows STEMI, and you take them to the lab? What are you coding then?
A lot of times the cardiologists are mentioning as an emergency, but they will also mention if it's a salvage PCI.
Okay.
So if they mention as salvage PCI, then I'm good.
Yeah, I was wondering how many are having their physicians document salvage, if their physicians are using it.
Do definitely. Salvage.
Sorry, Rosemary. Because the data definition for salvage, you know, is if the patient, well, it says procedure is last resort, which I feel like in those cases are, but then there's also the data definition about within the patient having CPR within 10 minutes of starting the study or arriving in the lab. How often is that occurring? It's not very often. It
Yeah,
kinda
this
goes
is,
back and forth.
sorry, this is Karen from Shady Grove. I very, very rarely code salvage, like maybe one every couple years, if that, because we don't have any extracorporeal support here at this facility. So the only thing that would qualify would be CPR within 10 minutes. And usually they will wait, you know, at least 10 minutes after ROSC to make the decision, yes, we're going to take this patient to the lab. But unfortunately, like you said, will often have that same outcome where we do fine, but because of prolonged anoxia, care is withdrawn and there's mortality and it shows up bad on us.
Correct. And like you said, that 10 minutes is really hard because you get ROSC, they're getting the EKG. You know, they're checking their lines. You're giving a COVID test because everybody's gonna get tested before they come. You got to activate the team. You got to get somebody there to transport the patient quickly. So there's a lot of things that are happening in those first 10 minutes.
Go there, and if it's a left main,
What's that?
go there and you see it's a left main. And most of them do. coding
Mine
in.
usually are not left mains. A lot of mine are more proximal LAD. I've had circumflexes. I've had RCAs. I've had them. Very rarely have I had a left main one.
Yeah, this
Very
is Cindy from Anne Arundel. I think they've done like the case scenarios on those and the monthly or every other month calls. And just to have the physician or interventionalist document salvage does not meet criteria. It's very hard to meet criteria.
Yeah, this is Martha. I was going to say the same thing. We don't have a lot of salvage because if you read the data definition, it specifically says that 10 minutes or like the ECMO. So even if, and we have a lot of out of hospital cardiac arrest, they most likely are not salvaged. They're not having that cardiac arrest within that 10 minutes of starting.
Yeah, it's very rare that I've coded them. I mean, I feel like the time that I'm coding them is if the patient arrests again when they get to the cath lab, then I'm coding it then. And we've recently too, we've had more patients coming to the lab with the Lucas device on as well. So I don't know how many people are doing that. Patients coming to the lab with the Lucas device.
I have seen definitely. This is a couple of years ago, not recent.
Yeah. So I was just kind of curious to see what people were doing. Documentation and coding on this part. It's so, and you know, and if you go back and you look at the data definition, because I think the first line says the procedure is the last resort. So does it have to be in the in what's documented? Does it have to be all of those things? Does it have to be the procedure is the last resort, the patient is in shock and they've received CPR within 10 minutes? Or is it an and or?
My interpretation is both.
Both, okay.
Mine as well. Usually the CAP-PCI with their data definitions, they're pretty specific if it's an or.
True.
Why it's so rare.
It's, yeah.
It is
that's
very rare. It
It's
is. I feel like at the data definition, it might need some adjustment over time. Because, you know, when you do have patients that are coding for 45 minutes, it's going to be very rare that they're going to live. And I think I had this huge, it's probably been 3 or 4 years. I had a very long mortality discussion with someone because at ACC and CDR, because we're going over the mortality metrics. And their thought process was that maybe your physician should be questioning who they're going to take to the lab. And it's very hard for the physicians to make that adjustment because they're like, this is what the family wants, or this is a young person, or we should, you know, we should give them every chance they have. So we've had lots of discussions about how you're going to make that decision to say no. I'm not. Okay. And then I had another question for everyone about coding congestive heart failure in STEMI cases.
We had this discussion all the time. I mean, we can't do an echo prior. Our intervention cardiologists don't like to waste time doing an echo.
No.
We only have an LV EV, right? So it's very hard to get an ejection fraction before they do the intervention. It's always, most of the time, I don't have a congestive heart failure. Even though most of the they believe the patient is heart failure.
So the reason why I
This
asked
is
about.
Mary, I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
Deborah,
Mary.
but
Go.
do you ever use the EDP? If it's elevated?
No, I don't think.
No,
No. And one thing I just wanted to say about the cardiac arrest patients, our hospital had some issues with high mortalities with that. And now we do a very fast bedside LV to see if there's wall motion abnormality. And if there is, they go ahead and take them to the cath lab after ROSC. And if there isn't, they will wait and try to get a differential diagnosis to why they had the cardiac arrest. Seems to be helping us a little bit with our mortality.
yeah, and that's why I kind of picked these two things to talk about, because these are drivers of mortality, you know, they're looking to see what you're coding salvage, emergent, New York Heart Association class. And that's hard because a lot of times the STEMIs are coming in and it's going so quickly, you're trying to get to the lab. I know sometimes we get a chest x-ray and I will try to use the results from that. But a lot of times heart failure doesn't get documented until after the procedures happen and the patient's in the room and then they can take their full time to analyze the patient. You have a post-procedure form that the docs fill out that they document heart failure status and grade on presentation to the lab prior to procedure. I know we've talked about having a form as well. Anyone else using a form for their procedures to make sure that documentation is having?
Yeah, this is Amanda from Frederick. We put together a post-procedure form specific for cath lab patients. So the doctors need to fill out, reasons for visit, heart failure present, yes or no, grade, and systolic or diastolic. And they also fill out symptomatology, typical, atypical angina, unsymptomatic or asymptomatic ACS, that kind of stuff. So that can clarify some of their lack of or fuzzy documentation because they each document so differently.
Agree. On your form, do you also have them document frailty?
No. our APPs do that in their their pre-assessment form. So that's taken care of on ours, but there's still that gap.
Off hours, still a guess.
Yeah. But we do have our mid-levels, our APPs, take care of the documentation on their pre-cath assessment.
Yeah, because I think the frailty is another strong driver too in the mortality metric. Well, I know that the Q3 came out recently, and I don't know how much everybody looked at their mortality. I pulled up my risk standardized mortality for all patients. And I go in and I look at what was the predictability for each of my deaths. So I had one of my deaths, the predictability was 98% on it. It's the highest I've ever scored on predictability. But it was a salvage patient. It was New York Heart Association class 4. It was a proximal LAD. It was a cardiac arrest, they had shock, they never retained consciousness. But what was interesting in the frailty section, all of my patients were documented no, it's no frailty, which I know for all my cardiac arrest patients, I document terminally ill for frailty. So I don't understand why it came across in the patient drill down that way. There was a mistake on NCDR or I'm not sure. So I don't know if anybody else has dug into some of their data and done their drill downs to look at it.
Hey, Deb, this is Rhonda from Frederick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So, it's a blessing and a curse to having the APPs doing the frailty scores because, sometimes we'll read it and we know that patient is not a 4. But if they've documented that they're 4, you can't go by their symptomology at that point. I asked that to the ACC. I said, what if the documentation and just what they're saying about the patient clearly shows that they're laying on the stretcher, they can't move, they can't do anything, and they're close to being intubated. Those people are not a 4 or a 5. But they said if somebody documents a number, you have to use the number.
Yeah, I don't know how you could do that. I mean, like you said, it's a patient who's intubated and they're laying on the table and they can't do anything. I think that that's a terminally ill patient.
Right, so yeah, I will tell you, I don't pick terminally ill very much because it says terminally ill, but that's typically not based on their current situation. Maybe they have cancer and they're terminally ill, but it doesn't, I think sometimes the 7 is just as good as the 8. But we do have the NPs or the APPs change the frailty score based on what we see. Like we'll call them and say, this isn't right, you need to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the only people that I'm pretty much putting terminally ill is just the cardiac arrest patients. Unless you said it's like somebody that they have documented has less than 6 months to live, but pretty much all my cardiac arrest patients that are unconscious, intubated, like those are the only ones I pretty much put terminally ill. I was just I didn't understand when I went on the drill down though, they weren't classified as a yes for frailty. They were all classified as no, even though I had documented it differently. Which didn't make any sense.
Does the number have to be abstracted from the chart, or are we still at liberty of deciding what it is ourselves? I thought that had changed.
I'm not sure. Do you know, Judy?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering if a frailty score number had to be backed up by documentation in the chart, or if it could just be, subjectively decided on by the abstractor.
I haven't seen anything come out, from NCDR that says you can't.
Okay.
So I've been, making judgment calls based on the patient condition prior to going into the cath lab. Because I thought that was what we were allowed to do.
The last I heard from the ACC, when I asked them that specific question, they told me we could interpret based on documentation unless a number was given. And if a number was given, we had to use that.
So
I guess we can give more work to our intervention cardiologists, give them a form at the end of the SEMI. Show you document frailty score.
Well, there's an idea. Our docs cannot sign the final cath report without frailty. So we make it a hard stop in Epic. Yeah. I think our docs would have the meltdown. It's already so many hard stops for them.
And if you look at the definitions, they're so, I don't know. It's kind of not easy to subjectively figure out what they are.
So Nina says they are also missing elements that we know are extractive, but not on patient drill down. We have an open ticket with NCDR. Let me know, Nina, what happens to that. I was thinking about opening a ticket this week. Well, after looking at it. Typically, if you don't, I know if you don't have an EF, they will populate an EF usually. And I think I even had a couple patients that didn't have a populated EF. Because they'll use prior heart failure and prior MI to guess what an EF is, which would be, an EF is a pretty strong predictor for mortality. So let's see why, Mary, you guys are stopping quickly and just getting a quick shot to get an EF. How many other people are stopping on the way to the lab with the STEMI to get a quick echo peak for an EF? Is anyone else doing that?
Nope.
This is Jean at University. Our ER docs will do that sometimes. If it's a really critical case and they want to know where they stand before they ever determine if they're going to go to the cath lab or not. But they have that skill set. Not everybody does.
You know, Deb,
Yeah.
just stepping back for the frailty thing, I just pulled up, the companion guide. And this might have something to do with, the risk model. One of the following: severely frail, severely frail. It's hard to say very quickly. Terminally ill without any of the following: cardiogenic shock, refractory cardiogenic shock, cardiac arrest, or salvage. So maybe that's part of the reason why the list says no. If your patient had those other conditions. Because it's already taken into account.
The patient is terminally ill.
It's already taken, part of the, the shock is also part of, the model, PCI status and clinical instability, and they've broken it out to, with exclusive groups that, are different. So they probably won't double count and determine, the predicted probability of death. Just that might be the reason.
Okay. All right. So moving on, we did have another question about, someone had emailed a question about cardiac rehab referral and documentation. Remember who that was? Do you remember, Courtney?
That was me, Tony from Anne Arundel.
Okay, so I will give you the floor, Tony, for the question about cardiac rehab.
We're just, we're struggling with it. We had some, we would put in a cardiology consult, cardiology would put in a consult for cardiac rehab. We had a system in place where the patient was visited by a cardiac rehab specialist in the floor. They were given all the education and whatnot. And really that whole system fell apart. So we're back to struggling with getting referrals and consults to cardiac rehab and having the patient education piece entered in. It looks to me like, well, and we have to deal with NCDR, not just get with the guidelines. So is everybody are the providers for your hospitals writing a note about cardiac rehab education or the benefits of cardiac rehab? Are nursing providers doing that? How are you making this happen?
For me, sometimes it's the providers. I've kind of tried to beat them to death about having smart phrases to use. Sometimes it's the fellows or the resident. Other times, I'm getting it from the case managers because they're giving the patient like we have a pamphlet and they give a flyer to the patient with all the information on it, and then they document it in their note. So sometimes it comes from them.
And are you having any difficulty with what we are calling here? It's an ambulatory referral to cardiac rehab. Are you getting any pushback? We have our own cardiac rehab department here on campus, but I know not all hospitals do. And I didn't know if you had any kickback from any of the rehabs about having someone other than a cardiologist or, maybe
there's
an
certain
NP.
There's certain Medicare guidelines, Tony.
Mhm.
So an NP or a PA cannot write the referral for cardiac rehab.
Right.
Medicare will not accept it. So it definitely has to come from a physician.
So how do you get around that with the discharging physician, let's say? Like is it an in-house consult or is it an ambulatory referral that's not done until they're outpatient? Because when I talked to the representative at NCDR, they said it had to be an official referral that was faxed over prior to them leaving. The frustration for us is we're not meeting the measure, but all of our patients are you can see where they're enrolled and attending cardiac rehab. And according to NCDR, we're not meeting the measure. It's quite frustrating.
So typically what can happen, Cynthia, in that case is that number one, the discharging physician or whoever seeing the patient on the floor should be writing the referral. Number two, you can do an outpatient cardiac rehab consultation if you have a rehab on site. And then they will come and talk to the patient because it gives them a way to sign up the patient. And that they can provide the documentation for the patient was seen, the patient was given a referral. We've discussed the benefits of cardiac rehab. So it kind of crosses off all those things that you need to mark the yes for NCDR.
So that was our process before, but it was a consult, just like you would consult OT or PT, and they would walk across. They don't have the staffing to meet with all the patients consistently now. So we're looking for someone else to provide that education. So the case manager seems like a great idea as well as the providers, but I think our staff has been very spoiled by cardiac rehab doing all the documentation.
We have it included in our discharge instructions. So they have the order written. So cardiac rehab gets the notification. And then the nurses, review the discharge instructions with them. And part of that is the contact information for cardiac rehab, as well as, the benefits and why they want to have it.
So do you capture that by a note that says AVS discussed with patient and they've signed it off? Is that how you capture the fact that the education was done?
It's in the discharge instruction. So, it's there available,
It doesn't mean someone talked to them about it.
No, but, they do, sign that they've reviewed the discharge instruction.
Okay.
And that's part of the discharge.
Have you had an audit based on that? Just out of curiosity.
It's been a few years since we had an audit for CAF PCI, but that was our process.
Okay.
At that point.
Yeah, I would like to think that would be a way to capture it. I'm just a little worried about it. And speaking of audits, was anyone audited this summer, and have you heard a report back or I've queried about when are we going to hear back, and I haven't even had an answer to that question, just out of curiosity.
So at Howard County, we were audited, and I was supposed to get results back in end of December, and I emailed them and they said end of January, and I've not heard anything back from them.
Okay, we're on the same track, Brenda.
Thank God I'm not alone.
No.
And my
Yes.
physicians are worried when they refer to cardiac rehab, they're not the people following those patients. So they are worried they get inundated by rehab notes. So that's their thing, is that, then they have to forward them on to the other physician. And so we're trying to figure out a way to make that more seamless, where it goes to the person who's actually following up with these patients.
Especially Kaiser patients, they can't have, they have to have.
Kaisers have to go to a certain place. They're like a whole nother problem because they have to have a referral within their own practice.
We have a system where the ordering physician defaults to the referring cardiologist, and then so it's sent to them to then sign.
Yeah, thank you. I think our problem is still that it's like Cindy said, it's happening, but we haven't found a successful way of capturing the documentation in a way that we feel comfortable will meet NCDR standards. And if we had our audit back, we would know whether or not the process we had in place before was, if we could just sort of move forward with something similar to that, we would know whether that was going to be okay, because it wasn't a referral, it was the consult to cardiac rehab, and then the follow-up physician 2 weeks after discharge would write the actual referral for the patient. So, but we haven't. Yeah,
we have our APC's document discussion with the patient of the program, and then the order goes in from them with the referring cardiologist's name, and then it gets sent to the referring cardiologist.
But they have to
sign.
co-sign.
Yeah, they have to co-sign it.
Okay.
We were going back and forth with NCDR, a couple of us, if you don't have it documented before they get discharged, it's a no. But whereas AHA, you have 30 days to have that at, the note back in the patient's chart. Say the STEMI patient came for the weekend and they get discharged by any actual cardiologist sees them. I mean, because the on-call cardiologist is seeing them over the weekend, but if we have any documentation after they get discharged, it's a no. They're going to be discussing, I'm pretty sure they'll be discussing about all this in our March.
In the March meeting, NCDR will be.
So we were going back and forth with them with this documentation.
Yeah, I think that they need to really think about the metric about that.
Thank you all for your input.
All right, thanks, Tony.
Send me any other ideas or solutions.
Thank you all.
The next agenda item is, does anyone seem to have a contingency plan if your primary data coordinator is absent? Let's say if there's only one of you at a hospital and you have to go out on FMLA because something happens, God forbidden, what is the contingency plan at your hospital?
So we have a vendor.
You have a what?
A vendor, like ADN, does our abstractions.
A vendor.
A vendor.
We try to keep them, even though we lost our full-time person who does our Get With The Guidelines CAD registries. So now it's on me to do both the registries. But we were just giving them like 1 or 2 registries a month just to keep them, in these situations. I know they charge a lot just to do 1 registry. But, at least 1 patient a month.
Anyone else have a contingency plan?
We don't.
Well, Tony, I've trained my coworker and she does some of the electives. She doesn't like delve into the STEMIs and non-STEMIs. So at least she has access. And I think if she had to at least keep up for a bit, it would be good. But yeah, that is a scary thought.
Don't have the backup.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I know there's companies out there that you can get like an agency person to come in. It would be like getting an agency nurse. Because I've had a few of them approach me on LinkedIn for a job saying, we'll pay you per study that you do. So that would maybe be another process. The hospital would just have to hire somebody like that.
I don't think we do it in Maryland, but in other states, definitely a lot of them outsource them to agencies like this. And QCentrix is very well known for PCI registry. They charge a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just for one case. I want to say it's like $75 or $55.
But someone still has to run them, like you, or not run them, but provide them the cases and stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they have to have the access.
Yeah.
So they still have to go through all the training to get the
Exactly.
access too, which would take a certain amount of time.
Does anybody upload their patient information from their EMR?
So we use Epic, and our CAF PCI is built into Epic. And then we upload to NCDR from there.
And that's all your PCI patients? That's not chest pain MI, right?
No, not just PNMI, just CAF PCI.
Okay.
We have CAF PCI built into Epic, and we have the ICD registries built into Epic as well.
What is it called in Epic?
Cupid.
So that's your actual documentation system in the lab?
Cupid is it's a cardiology program. So, and it's what we use for all of cardiology. I think like the Cupid is you can correct me if I'm wrong, Judy, but Cupid is like a higher level, I think from Epic, for it's one of those things that costs more. So they built more programs and it does more things for us.
So if someone had to abstract for you, at least the patients would be uploaded.
Right, they would know who the patients are to abstract, and it'll at least put out in all the demographics for them as well. So we've been working with Epic for, I don't know how many years, to get some of the data metrics auto-populated. Probably the only data metrics that I can 95% of the time guarantee they get auto-populated correctly is the demographics, admission, date and time, and discharge date and time.
Okay, that sounds about
Maybe-
right.
Maybe the admitting doctor. But it has its own quirks about it. But I will say it is easier doing it. That made us get rid of all the paperwork, and you don't have to open two screens. They're actually, it's side by side on the screen for you. In Epic, so that part is really nice.
Does it work for even NSTEMIs?
For what?
NSTEMI patient population?
It's all CAF PCI. It's the whole CAF PCI registry from XDR. It's all in there.
But how do you really know that's your type 1 NSTEMI patient?
This is for patients that go to the cath lab. It's not AHA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not chest pain MI, it's just
No.
if they're coded with an intervention and they're coded correctly, then they would populate.
So the way that we look for our MI patients, like the patients don't go to the lab. So we have an MI report that the Epic that we have built that we run weekly based upon troponin values. So anybody who has elevated troponins show up in that report, and then you gotta go through all those patients to see who's really a type 1 MI. Any other questions? Anything else anybody wants to discuss? I don't really have a case study today. We have lots of other discussion. That's right. Our next meeting is May 9th will be our next meeting. Happy Valentine's Day to you too, Margaret, and everyone else. And if you have any questions or concerns, please email.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks,
Thank
Deb.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you, Deb.